Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. When we think of the great explorers who mapped our world, who comes to mind? Columbus, Magellan, Marco Polo? For centuries, the grand narrative of global exploration has been a chronicle of courageous men. But this narrative is incomplete. Woven into this very same history is a vibrant, often overlooked thread of intrepid women who defied societal norms, shattered expectations, and charted their own courses across formidable landscapes, vast oceans, and even into the cosmos. These women were driven by curiosity, ambition, and a thirst for knowledge. They didn't just break geographical boundaries, they shattered the confines of gender roles. Today, we're telling their story, the trailblazing women who navigated not just uncharted territories, but a world that sought to limit their horizons. Our story begins 1,000 years ago, 5 full centuries before Christopher Columbus, with an Icelandic explorer named Gudrid Thorbjarnardóttir. Her incredible life is recounted in 2 famous Viking sagas, the Saga of the Greenlanders and the Saga of Eric the Red. Around the year 1000 AD, Gudrid sailed across the treacherous North Atlantic as part of the Viking expeditions to a new land they called Vinland, which we now know as North America. She wasn't just a passenger, she was an integral part of the settlement attempt. In fact, while in Vinland, she gave birth to a son named Snorri, who holds the distinction of being the first known person of European descent to be born in the Americas. This isn't just folklore. Archaeological evidence, such as a spindle whorl, a tool used for spinning yarn and a clear indicator of women's presence, found at the Lance on Meadow settlement in Newfoundland, supports the saga's accounts of women being part of these pioneering voyages. Gudrid's story is a powerful reminder that women were present at the very dawn of transatlantic exploration. Centuries later, in the late 4th century Roman Empire, another remarkable woman undertook a journey of a different kind. Known to us only as Egeria, she was likely a nun from Galatia, a province in modern-day Spain. Egeria embarked on a 3-year pilgrimage to the Holy Land, a journey of immense scale and difficulty for the time. What makes her journey so significant is that she meticulously documented it. She wrote a long, detailed letter to a circle of women back home, describing everything she saw with a scholar's eye. This letter, later compiled as The Travels of Egeria, is a historical treasure. It provides an invaluable and incredibly rare first-hand account of the Christian holy places, liturgies, and monastic life in Egypt, Palestine, Syria, and Mesopotamia during that period. She climbed Mount Sinai, visited the tomb of Job, and described Easter celebrations in Jerusalem in vivid detail. Egeria's writing reveals a resilient, intelligent, and deeply curious spirit, making her one of the earliest travel writers whose work survives. As we move into the age of sail, the 18th and 19th centuries saw a surge in global exploration, but the ship's decks and expedition teams became almost exclusively male domains. For a woman with a passion for science and discovery to participate, it often required an act of profound deception. Enter Jeanne Barré. A skilled French botanist from a humble background, she holds the incredible distinction of being the first woman to circumnavigate the globe. In 1766, she joined the expedition of Louis-Antoine de Bougainville, but she did so disguised as a man named Jean Barré. She was officially hired as the assistant to the expedition's naturalist, Philibert Commerson, who was also her partner. Barré was an expert herb woman with a deep knowledge of plants and their medicinal properties. On the voyage, Commerson suffered from frequent illness and a recurring leg injury, so it was Jeanne who undertook the lion's share of the physically demanding fieldwork. She ventured into jungles and up mountains in places like Brazil and Patagonia, carrying heavy wooden plant presses, collecting, cataloging, and identifying thousands of plants. Together, they collected over 6,000 specimens, many of which were new to science. One of their most famous discoveries was a vibrant vine they found in Brazil, which they named Bougainvillea, after their ship's captain. It was likely Jeanne who first collected it. Her true gender was a poorly kept secret among the crew and was eventually officially revealed, possibly in Tahiti. Following the revelation, she and Commerson were forced to leave the expedition on the island of Mauritius. Commerson died there, but Beret, ever resilient, worked for years before eventually finding passage on another ship that took her back to France, finally completing her circumnavigation. For her contribution, she was eventually granted a small pension by the French Navy, but her monumental achievement was never fully recognized in her lifetime. The 19th century gave rise to a new breed of female explorer, Victorian women who, using a combination of social standing and sheer willpower, broke free from the drawing room. Lady Hester Stanhope was one of the most eccentric and formidable. Niece of the British Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger, she was a celebrated London socialite. But after his death in 1806, she found her life in England unbearable. She left for the Middle East and never returned. Following a shipwreck off the coast of Rhodes that destroyed her European wardrobe, she adopted male Turkish attire, a turban, robes, and slippers, which she found far more practical and comfortable. This was not just a fashion choice, it was a statement of her independence. She traveled fearlessly through Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine, regions rarely visited by Europeans, let alone a European woman. Her audacity, intelligence, and commanding personality so impressed the local Bedouin tribes that they treated her as a noble of high rank, dubbing her the Queen of the Desert. In 1815, armed with a medieval Italian manuscript that claimed ancient treasure was buried in the ruins of Ashkelon, she convinced the Ottoman authorities to let her excavate. She conducted what is considered the first modern archaeological excavation in Palestine, employing methodical techniques. While she found no gold, she did unearth a 7-foot, headless marble statue. Another indomitable Victorian was Isabella Bird. Frail and suffering from various ailments throughout her life, she was encouraged by her father to live an open-air life, and a doctor later prescribed travel as a potential cure. It was a prescription she followed for the rest of her life. Starting in her 40s, she embarked on a series of extraordinary journeys that defied every stereotype of the delicate Victorian woman. She traveled to the American West, riding over 800 miles on horseback through the Rocky Mountains, often alone, befriending outlaws and sleeping in rough frontier cabins. She documented this in her sensational bestseller, A Latest Life in the Rocky Mountains. But she didn't stop there. Her travels took her to Hawaii, which she called the Sandwich Islands, where she climbed volcanoes. She explored remote parts of Japan, China, Vietnam, Singapore, and Korea, often being the first European woman to visit these regions. Her vivid, detailed accounts of the cultures, people, and landscapes she encountered captivated readers back home. Her contributions were so significant that in 1892, she became one of the first women, alongside 14 others, to be elected a Fellow of the prestigious Royal Geographical Society in London. While Stanhope and Bird traveled with a degree of privilege, Mary Kingsley ventured into a region considered one of the most dangerous on Earth, West Africa. In the 1890s, the area was known as the White Man's Grave, due to the high mortality rate from tropical diseases like malaria. Kingsley, a single Englishwoman with no formal education but a voracious appetite for books, made 2 voyages there in her 30s. Her stated goals were to study African traditional religions, which she referred to as fetish, and to collect scientific specimens of fish for the British Museum. She traveled light, usually with local guides from the Fang tribe, who were then stereotyped in Europe as savage cannibals. Kingsley found them to be reliable partners. She canoed up the Ogooué River in Gabon, collecting fish specimens previously unknown to Western science, and became the first European to enter parts of Gabon and climb the Great Peak of Mount Cameroon. More importantly, Mary Kingsley challenged the prevailing racist and colonialist views of her time. She argued against the British colonial policy and the missionaries who sought to eradicate African cultures. In her hugely influential books, Travels in West Africa and West African Studies, she advocated for a more nuanced, respectful understanding of the societies she had come to know. The 20th century opened up entirely new frontiers for exploration, and women were at the forefront, breaking records and shaping world events. Gertrude Bell, an English writer, traveler, archaeologist, and political officer, was one such figure. Like Lady Hester Stanhope, she was dubbed a Queen of the Desert. A brilliant Oxford graduate, fluent in Arabic and Persian, her extensive travels across the Middle East gave her an unparalleled understanding of the region's complex tribal and political landscape. When World War I broke out, this knowledge became an invaluable asset to British intelligence. She, along with T.E. Lawrence, or Lawrence of Arabia, helped mobilize the Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire. After the war, she played a crucial role in the creation of the modern state of Iraq. At the 1921 Cairo Conference, she was the lone woman, advising Winston Churchill and helping to draw the country's borders and install its first ruler, King Faisal. A dedicated archaeologist, she feared that Iraq's rich heritage would be plundered by Western museums. To prevent this, she founded what would become the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad, establishing a law to ensure artifacts found in Iraq would stay in Iraq. Around the same time, the Belgian-French explorer and spiritualist Alexandre David Neil was undertaking a quest of a very different nature. Fascinated by Tibetan Buddhism, she spent years traveling through Asia. Her most legendary accomplishment was her clandestine journey to Lhasa, the forbidden capital of Tibet, in 1924. At the time, Lhasa was strictly closed to all foreigners. At the age of 55, disguised as a poor Tibetan pilgrim, begging for food and carrying her own pack, she, along with her adopted son, a young Sikkimese Lama, trekked for months across the treacherous, freezing Himalayas. They endured extreme cold, starvation, and constant risk of discovery by authorities. Her successful entry into Lhasa, where she spent 2 months, made her the first European woman to accomplish this feat. Her books about her travels and about Tibetan Buddhism introduced its complex philosophies to a generation of Western readers. The skies became the next great frontier, and no one captured the world's imagination quite like Amelia Earhart. In 1932, 5 years after Charles Lindbergh's famous flight, she became the first woman to fly solo and non-stop across the Atlantic Ocean. This daring feat made her an international celebrity. But she was more than a record setter. She was a tireless advocate for women's rights and for the advancement of women in aviation. She set numerous other records, including being the first person to fly solo from Hawaii to the U.S. mainland. In 1937, she embarked on her most ambitious project, to circumnavigate the globe by plane. Tragically, during one of the final legs of the journey, her plane disappeared over the Pacific Ocean. Despite a massive search effort, she was never found. Her mysterious disappearance has only added to her legend as a pioneer who pushed the limits of flight. The race to space was the next great geopolitical contest, and on June 16, 1963, the Soviet Union scored a major propaganda victory. Cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman to travel into space. A former textile factory worker and an amateur skydiver, she was selected from over 400 applicants and 5 finalists to pilot the Vostok 6 mission. She was chosen not just for her parachuting skill, but for her proletarian background and her dedication to the Communist Party. She orbited the Earth 48 times, spending nearly 3 days in space. In that single flight, she logged more flight time than all of the American Mercury astronauts combined up to that point. Her mission was a global sensation, proving that space was not exclusively a man's domain. Back on Earth, the planet's highest peaks remained a formidable challenge. On May 16, 1975, a Japanese mountaineer named Junko Tabei made history when she became the first woman to reach the summit of Mount Everest. Her journey to the top was a testament to sheer determination. Just 12 days before her planned final ascent, while camped at over 300 meters, her team was struck by a massive avalanche. Tabei herself was buried under the snow and ice and knocked unconscious. She was dug out by her Sherpa guide, bruised and barely able to walk. Many would have abandoned the attempt, but Tabei was undeterred. After a few days of recovery, she insisted on continuing. She led her team up the final ridge and stood on top of the world, a pioneer who refused to be beaten. In 1992, she cemented her legacy by becoming the first woman to complete the 7 summits, climbing the highest mountain on each of the 7 continents. Finally, the Earth's frozen poles, long the exclusive realm of male heroic age explorers, slowly began to open to women. The progress was slow. It wasn't until 1935 that Caroline Mikkelsen, the wife of a Norwegian whaling captain, became the first woman to even set foot on an Antarctic island. The first female scientist, Soviet marine geologist Maria Klenova, didn't arrive to work there until 1956, but the barriers continued to fall. In 1993, American explorer Anne Bancroft led the first all-woman expedition to ski to the South Pole. Then, in 2001, Bancroft and Norwegian explorer Liv Arnesen made history again, becoming the first women to ski across the entire Antarctic landmass, a grueling 94-day journey across 700 miles of ice. In the 21st century, women continue to push the boundaries of exploration in every field imaginable. Dr. Sylvia Earle, an American marine biologist nicknamed her Deepness, has been a pioneer in underwater exploration for decades. As a former chief scientist of the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, she has led over 100 expeditions and spent more than 7,000 hours underwater, including living for 2 weeks in an undersea habitat. Through her Mission Blue initiative, she works tirelessly to establish marine protected areas, which she calls hope spots, around the globe to safeguard the health of our vital oceans. In a completely different domain, in 2019, Jessica Nabongo, a Ugandan-American travel writer and entrepreneur, became the first Black woman on record to visit every country in the world. Her journey to all 195 UN-recognized nations was not just about ticking off a list. It was a mission to challenge perceptions, to showcase the diversity and beauty of the world, and to encourage a new generation of travelers, particularly people of color, to explore the world on their own terms. The legacy of these women is a legacy of courage, but it's also a story of overcoming immense obstacles. For centuries, they were held back by societal norms, gender bias, and discrimination at every turn. They struggled to secure funding, sponsorship, and recognition. Many, like Jeanne Beret, had to literally erase their gender to get a foot in the door. They faced disapproval from their families and were often dismissed as eccentric or reckless. Even today, in fields like space exploration and polar science, women remain underrepresented in leadership roles and still face significant challenges. From the sagas of Viking voyages to the digital chronicles of modern-day adventurers, the story of women in global exploration is one of extraordinary resilience and an unyielding thirst for knowledge. They have not only contributed immeasurably to our understanding of the world, but have also paved the way for future generations of female explorers, scientists, and adventurers. Their journeys remind us that the spirit of exploration knows no gender and that the pursuit of discovery is a universal human endeavor. By charting new waters, both literally and figuratively, they have left an indelible mark on history and continue to inspire us all to push our own boundaries and explore the world with open minds and adventurous hearts. Thank you for joining us on G Fun Facts Online.